Mocking laughter rang out, turning the CEO's daughter into a joke in the middle of a billion-dollar dinner. But just minutes later, when the arrogant billionaire family bragged about their $750 million deal, the young woman quietly lifted her phone and ordered its cancellation. The entire hall froze, every eye locked on the girl they had mocked, and in seconds, their $750 million empire crumbled before them. Sophia stood at the edge of the grand ballroom, her back to the towering windows that framed Manhattan's skyline. The city lights twinkled outside, a quiet contrast to the sharp glitter of the chandeliers above. Her dress was plain black, no designer label, no embellishments, just clean lines that hugged her frame modestly. Her dark hair fell in loose waves untouched by a stylist's hands, and her face was bare. No makeup, no gloss, just her natural features beautiful in a way that didn't demand attention. She was 24, raised in one of the wealthiest families in the country, but you'd never know it looking at her. Her father had taught her early on to carry herself with discipline, to let her actions speak louder than flash. "Never show off," he'd said when she was a kid, his voice steady. "Your worth isn't in what you wear, it's in what you do." Tonight, though, in this room full of billionaires and their egos, her simplicity made her a target. The gala was a spectacle, a glittering stage where wealth and power played out in real time. Crystal glasses clinked, heels clicked on marble floors, and every laugh felt like a performance. The air was heavy with the scent of expensive perfume and ambition. Billionaires and their families mingled, their voices loud as they discussed deals, investments, and who was who in their world. Sophia had slipped in quietly, hoping to blend into the background, her small clutch tucked under her arm. She was here to observe, to see the $750 million investment deal her father had been working on for months with the Montgomerys, a family known for their ruthlessness and their need to dominate every room. She'd overheard her father that morning, his voice low over coffee. "They're sharks, Sophia," he'd said, "but their resources could change everything for us." She'd nodded, already bracing for the night ahead. She found a spot near the windows, the cool glass a small anchor against the heat of the crowd. Her hands were folded in front of her, her posture calm but alert. She wasn't here to make a scene or to prove anything. She just wanted to understand the players her father was dealing with. But before she could settle into the moment, a voice cut through the hum of conversation. Marcus Montgomery, the billionaire's son, strutted toward her, his tailored suit gleaming under the lights, his smirk sharp enough to cut. He was in his late 20s, all slick hair and entitlement. He stopped too close, his cologne overwhelming, and leaned in. "You look like a waitress in that dress," he said, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. Heads turned. A ripple of laughter spread, sharp and mean like a blade slicing through the air. Sophia's fingers tightened on her clutch, but her face stayed steady, her eyes locking onto his without a flicker of doubt. She didn't say a word. Her gaze was enough to make him shift just for a second before he doubled down with a grin. A woman across the table, her earrings dangling like chandeliers, tilted her head and squinted at Sophia. She was Diana, a socialite known for her sharp tongue and sharper Instagram posts. "Sweetheart, did you borrow that dress from your mom's closet?" she asked, her voice dripping with fake pity. The table burst into laughter again, some clapping like it was a show. Diana leaned back, sipping her champagne, her eyes never leaving Sophia, waiting for a crack in her composure. Sophia's lips parted just for a moment as if she might speak. But instead she adjusted her clutch, her fingers deliberate, and let her silence answer. The laughter grew, a wave crashing over the tables. A woman in a glittering red gown, her lips painted to match, leaned forward from her seat. Victoria Montgomery, Marcus's mother, was the kind of person who could smile while twisting the knife. Her eyes sparkled with malice as she spoke, her voice carrying across the room. "CEO's daughter. She looks more like a poor student," she said, drawing out the words for maximum effect. The table erupted, their laughter louder now, more confident. A man in a tux shook his head and muttered, "Her father must be ashamed to bring her here." The words stung, sharp and personal, but Sophia didn't flinch. She smiled faintly and took a slow sip of her water. A younger man, maybe a cousin of the Montgomerys, leaned forward, his tie slightly crooked, his grin wide. He was Nathan, always eager to pile on. "Hey, no offense," he said, holding up his hands, "but you're standing by the window like you're waiting for a bus. You sure you're at the right event?" The table howled, some slapping the table. Sophia's shoulders tensed just for a second before she turned slightly, her eyes catching the city lights outside. She didn't answer, but the way she tilted her head made his grin falter. A young woman with perfect blonde curls, her dress a cascade of sequins, leaned toward her friend and stage whispered, "Why is she even here? She doesn't belong." Her friend chuckled and added, "Maybe she's lost. Someone should point her to the staff exit." The table roared again. Sophia set her glass down, her movement slow and deliberate. She didn't look at them. Her silence was a wall they couldn't climb, a quiet defiance that made their laughter sound hollow. A waiter paused near Sophia, offering her a fresh napkin, his voice low. "Ma'am, would you like another?" Sophia met his gaze, her expression softening. She took the napkin and nodded slightly. "Thank you," she said quietly. The moment was small, but it cut through the noise, a reminder that not everyone was playing the Montgomery's game. Dinner began. Waiters moved through the room, plates clattering softly. Sophia picked up her fork and listened as the conversation turned to the deal. The Montgomerys were in their element now, throwing around numbers and projections. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his voice loud and smug. "This deal is going to redefine the industry," he said, glancing at his father, William Montgomery, who nodded with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no. William was the patriarch, his gray hair slicked back, his suit tailored to perfection. Sophia tilted her head, her eyes narrowing. She spoke up, her voice clear and calm. "The market's volatile right now. Your projections don't account for the tariffs hitting next quarter or the supply chain issues in Asia." The table went quiet. An older businessman raised an eyebrow. "She's not wrong," he said almost to himself. "That's sharper than my advisor's take." A few others nodded, their expressions shifting from mockery to curiosity. Marcus's smirk faltered. "Lucky guess," he snapped, tossing his napkin onto the table. But the air had changed. People were looking at Sophia differently now. A man in a pinstriped suit leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. He was Gregory, a Montgomery ally. "You talk a big game for someone who looks like they shop at thrift stores," he said mockingly. "Where'd you learn to sound so smart? Community college?" The table snickered. Sophia paused, her fork hovering over her plate, then set it down with a soft clink. She looked at Gregory and asked, "Where'd you learn to judge people by their clothes?" The question was simple, delivered without venom, but it landed like a slap. Gregory's face reddened, and the table's laughter stuttered. The moment didn't last. Marcus stood up, his movements theatrical. He grabbed his wine glass and sauntered toward Sophia. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he spilled red wine across her dress. The liquid splashed over the black fabric, soaking it through. "Oops, sorry," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "At least now it matches your cheap outfit." The room exploded in laughter. Victoria clapped her hands, delighted, and added, "If she were really a CEO's daughter, she'd be wearing designer brands." The table raised their glasses, toasting to their cruelty. A woman stood up to join the fray. She was Isabella, a distant Montgomery relative. She walked over to Sophia, her heels clicking loudly, and held up her phone, snapping a photo of the wine-stained dress. "This is going straight to my followers," she said gleefully. They'll love seeing the CEO's daughter looking like a mess. The table cheered, some pulling out their own phones. Sophia's hand paused on the napkin, her fingers curling slightly, but she didn't look at Isabella. Instead, she reached for her glass, took a slow sip, and set it down with a deliberate clink. Sophia looked down at the stain, her fingers brushing the wet fabric. Her fists tightened for a moment, then relaxed. She stood, her movement slow and graceful, and faced Marcus. Her voice was soft but sharp. Do you truly believe appearance is everything? The question hung in the air, simple but heavy. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it, his confidence cracking. A man at the table blurted out, "That's exactly her father's composure." Sophia didn't wait for a response. She picked up a napkin, dabbed at her dress, and sat back down, her eyes sharp as ice. A man whispered loud enough for Sophia to hear, "I bet she's just here to spy for her dad, probably taking notes to run back to him." Sophia's hand paused on her clutch. She turned slightly and asked, "What makes you think I need to take notes, the quad?" Sion was calm, but it carried weight that made him shrink back. The Montgomerys weren't done. William leaned forward, his voice booming. "Your father is about to sign a $750 million deal with us," he said, his tone heavy with condescension. Victoria chimed in, her smile venomous. "You're nothing here. If you're smart, you'll sit quietly and keep your mouth shut." The table erupted again. Sophia didn't move. She pulled out her phone, her fingers steady, and started typing. A young woman at a nearby table leaned forward, her voice loud. She was Natalie, a fashion influencer. "Girl, you should have at least borrowed some jewelry," she said, holding up her diamond bracelet. "This is a gala, not a book club." The table laughed. Sophia's eyes flicked to Natalie's bracelet, then back to her face. She leaned forward slightly. "Does that bracelet make you feel important?" The question was so direct that Natalie froze, her hand dropping to her lap. The room didn't notice at first. They were too busy laughing. But then Sophia held the phone to her ear, her voice low but clear. "Dad, I want this deal canceled. Right now." The words landed like a bomb. The laughter stopped. Glasses froze mid-air. William's face went slack. "Who do you think you are to interfere?" he snapped, standing so fast his chair scraped the floor. But then her father's voice came through the phone, loud enough for everyone to hear. "If my daughter says so, the deal is off." The hall went silent, the kind of silence that presses against your chest. A man stood up, his voice trembling with indignation. He was Benjamin, a Montgomery business partner. "This is outrageous," he shouted, pointing at Sophia. "You can't just waltz in here and ruin a deal like that." Sophia didn't look at him. She slipped her phone back into her clutch and folded her hands in her lap. Sophia set the phone down, her expression unchanged. And she didn't gloat. The Montgomerys were unraveling. Marcus's hands shook as he reached for his glass. Victoria's smile vanished, her face pale as she clutched her necklace. William stammered, "Mr. CEO, please let us explain." But the line was already dead. Guests started whispering. A woman pulled out her phone. Another man leaned toward his wife, muttering, "Did she just?" Sophia sat still, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes scanning the room. A man in a dark suit entered the ballroom. He was a lawyer, his briefcase clutched tightly. He walked straight to Sophia and handed her a folder. She opened it, glanced at the papers, and nodded. Then she stood, her voice steady but firm. "Here's the evidence," she said, holding up the documents. "The contract was voided in the system 10 minutes ago. You won't see a single cent from this deal." The crowd gasped. The Montgomerys collapsed into their seats, their faces drained of color. Marcus stared at the floor, his hands gripping the table. A woman stood up, her voice shaking. She was Rachel, a Montgomery family friend. "You're making a mistake," she said, her eyes wide. "You're throwing away years of planning." Sophia closed the folder and looked at Rachel. "The mistake was yours," she said calmly. "You assumed I was nobody." Rachel's mouth opened, then closed as she sank back into her chair. The room was chaos now. One of the Montgomerys screamed, "You've destroyed our family's future!" Victoria gasped, her voice trembling. "You don't understand the consequences!" But Sophia didn't flinch. She closed the folder and handed it back to the lawyer. A man at the edge of the room stepped forward, his voice shaky. He was Christopher, a junior executive. "You can't do this," he said. "You're just a kid playing with power you don't understand." Sophia turned to him, her eyes steady. "I understand power better than you ever will." The words were quiet, but they hit like a thunderclap. Christopher stumbled back, his phone slipping from his hand. Sophia's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her expression softening for the first time all night. She slipped it back into her clutch and turned toward the door. The crowd parted as she walked, her steps slow but steady, her stained dress somehow looking regal now. Nobody spoke. Nobody dared. Phones around the room lit up with notifications. Bank alerts, emails, panicked messages. The family's accounts were frozen, their assets locked, their deal dead. Marcus's face was ashen. Victoria clutched her husband's arm, her nails digging into his sleeve. A woman stood up, tears smearing her mascara. She was Elena, a Montgomery ally. "You're ruining everything," she cried. "Do you know what this means for us?" Sophia paused at the door and turned back just enough to meet Elena's eyes. "I know exactly what it means," she said steadily. Elena sank back into her chair, her hands covering her face. A man stepped into the room and everything changed. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his presence commanding. Sophia's husband didn't need an introduction. The way the room shifted said it all. William tried to stand. "We can fix this," he said desperately. Marcus looked away. Victoria's eyes darted to the floor. Sophia's husband walked to her side, his hand brushing hers lightly. She looked up at him, and for a moment, her face softened. The fallout was swift. The next morning, headlines screamed across every major outlet. A single call from the CEO's daughter destroyed a $750 million empire in seconds. Social media was relentless. A video of Marcus spilling the wine went viral. He was dropped from his family's company board within hours. Victoria's charity foundation lost its biggest sponsors by noon. William spent weeks trying to salvage what was left. But the numbers didn't lie. Their empire was gone. Isabella's photo of Sophia's stained dress backfired, the comments tearing her apart. She deleted her account by the end of the day. Sophia didn't stay to watch it unfold. She left the gala with her husband, her steps steady, her head high. The next day, she was back at her father's office, sitting in a meeting, her plain dress replaced with another simple outfit. Nobody mentioned the night before. The way people looked at her now, cautious, respectful, said enough. She didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Her silence carried weight, her presence enough to shift the room. A junior assistant dropped a file on her desk and whispered, "I saw the news. You were incredible." Sophia nodded, her expression unchanged, but her eyes softened before she turned back to her work. Years ago, she'd stood in a different room with her father. She was 16, her sneakers scuffed. "You don't need to prove anything to anyone," he'd said. "Just be you. That's enough." She'd nodded and carried those words with her ever since. The Montgomerys' downfall didn't end with the gala. Marcus's face was everywhere, his smirk replaced with defeat. He tried to post an apology online, but the comments tore him apart. Victoria's social circle shrank, her invitations drying up. She was seen at a coffee shop a week later, alone. William's company lost contracts, investors pulling out. Diana's Instagram posts were deleted, her followers dropping. Nathan was quietly let go from his job. The family's name, once untouchable, was now a cautionary tale. Sophia kept moving forward. She didn't read the headlines. She was too busy working, sitting in on meetings, reviewing contracts. Her father trusted her, always had. She'd grown up watching him navigate rooms like the one at the gala, watching him stay calm when others lost their nerve. At a board meeting a week later, an executive hesitated before addressing her. "Ms. Sophia, your input on the new strategy." She nodded and gave her thoughts, her words precise and unshakable. "You've felt it, haven't you? That moment when someone looks at you and decides you're less. When they laugh, thinking they've got you figured out. But you know who you are. You know your worth. You're not alone in that. Sophia's story isn't just hers, it's yours too.